The diplomatic misstep. Jack Sullivan adjusted the tight collar of his uniform as he stepped into the grand hall of Tarquil, the alien capital city. The room shimmered with soft blue lights, the walls alive with flowing patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. As a soldier on his first diplomatic mission to this alien world, Jack was trying to stay calm, but the sheer grandeur of the event was overwhelming. The hall was packed with Xarquilians, tall, elegant beings with silver skin and glowing, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to see right through him. Jack's job was simple: represent humanity at a cultural exchange ceremony. His commanding officer had stressed one thing: don't offend anyone. But as Jack looked around, he realized that understanding alien customs was far more complicated than it sounded. Every movement, every word seemed to have some deeper meaning to the Xarquilians. He clenched his fists nervously, hoping he wouldn't accidentally do something wrong. At the center of the room stood Lyra, the daughter of the Xarquilian leader. She was dressed in a flowing, iridescent gown that shifted colors as she moved, her silver hair braided with tiny crystals that sparkled like stars. Lyra exuded a calm confidence, though her curious gaze often lingered on Jack. She seemed intrigued by him, a stark contrast to the way the other aliens regarded him, more like an oddity than an honored guest. The ceremony began with the Xarquilian leader, a towering figure named Eldoran, stepping forward and speaking in a melodic alien language. Jack's translator device buzzed softly in his ear, turning the speech into English. "We welcome our human ally to this sacred event," Eldoran said. "Let this day mark the beginning of greater unity between our peoples." Jack nodded politely, hoping that was the right response. A Xarquilian attendant approached him, holding a tray with a strange, glowing object that looked like a mix between a flower and a crystal. Jack hesitated. Was he supposed to take it? Was it food? A gift? The translator provided no clear answer, so Jack decided to follow his instincts. He picked up the object carefully and mimicked the bow he'd seen the attendant perform. The room fell silent. Jack's heart sank. Did he mess up? Lyra stepped forward, her eyes wide with surprise. She said something in her native language, and the translator crackled to life. "You honor me greatly with this proposal, human." "Proposal?" Jack stammered, confused. Lyra smiled warmly, her silver skin glowing faintly. "Yes, I accept. This is a joyous day for our people." Jack's brain went blank. Proposal? Accept? What was happening? Before he could process her words, the room erupted in cheers. The Xarquilians began a melodic chant, their voices harmonizing in a way that filled the air with a strange, uplifting energy. Two attendants stepped forward and placed a shimmering garland over Jack's shoulders, while others began circling Lyra, showering her with petals of glowing flowers. Jack stood frozen, his mind racing. What just happened? He whispered to the translator. "You have engaged in the sacred bonding ritual of the Xarquilian people," the device responded mechanically. "Bonding ritual? You mean marriage?" Jack's voice rose in panic, but the cheers of the crowd drowned him out. Lyra approached him, her smile radiating warmth. "You have made me the happiest being on this planet," she said softly. "You are brave to offer such a gesture in front of my people." Jack opened his mouth to explain, but before he could, Eldoran stepped forward. The Xarquilian leader placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, his expression solemn. "You have shown great respect for our traditions, human. You are now bound to my daughter, Lyra. This union shall strengthen the bond between our peoples." Jack's stomach churned. Bound? Union? No. This wasn't supposed to happen. He glanced at Lyra, who looked genuinely happy, then back at Eldoran, who seemed impossibly proud. Thank you," Jack mumbled, unsure of what else to say. As the crowd began celebrating again, Jack's mind was spinning. How could he explain this was all a misunderstanding without offending everyone in the room? He had no idea what rejecting Lyra might mean for humanity's fragile relationship with the Exarquilians. To make matters worse, Lyra's older brother, a towering warrior named Krath, was glaring at Jack from across the room. The intensity in his glowing eyes made one thing clear: Jack was now part of this family, whether he liked it or not. The ceremony continued with music and dance, but Jack barely noticed. His heart pounded as he tried to think of a way out of this mess. Every time he caught Lyra's gaze, she smiled at him, and guilt twisted in his chest. She didn't deserve to be hurt by his mistake. As the evening wore on, Jack realized he was trapped. He'd have to play along for now, at least until he could figure out how to fix this without causing an intergalactic incident. But one thing was clear: this was only the beginning of his problems. The alien customs. Jack Sullivan sat in a quiet chamber adorned with glowing crystals and flowing tapestries, his head spinning with everything that had just happened. It had been less than an hour since he'd accidentally proposed to Lyra, the Exarquilian leader's daughter, and his entire world had flipped upside down. The room's shimmering walls seemed to pulse gently, as if alive, but Jack could barely appreciate the alien beauty. His translator device buzzed softly, pulling him out of his thoughts. "Human Jack, the bonding rituals must begin shortly," a melodic voice announced. Jack looked up to see a slender Exarquilian attendant standing in the doorway. Her silver skin glowed faintly, and her expression was one of calm curiosity. "Bonding rituals?" Jack asked, his voice betraying his panic. "Yes," the attendant said with a slight bow. "As is customary for newly engaged pairs, the rituals will solidify your connection and prepare you for your life together." Jack's mouth went dry. "Right. Of course. Totally normal," he muttered, though he was anything but calm. He was escorted to an open garden filled with luminous plants that seemed to hum faintly in the air. Lyra stood at the center, her silver hair catching the soft light. She turned to Jack with a radiant smile that made him feel even guiltier about the whole misunderstanding. "I hope you find our customs as fascinating as I find yours," Lyra said, her voice warm and genuine. Jack forced a smile, struggling to focus. "Oh, fascinating. Definitely fascinating," he replied awkwardly. The first ritual began. Lyra explained that they would exchange tokens of meaning, symbolic items that represented their bond. Jack panicked internally. He didn't have anything to give her, while Lyra presented him with a delicate crystal flower, grown only in the caves of Exarquil and symbolizing eternal trust. Jack scrambled to think of something meaningful. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his dog tags, the only thing he had. "This is from my world," he said, handing the small metal tags to Lyra. "It's personal to me." Lyra's eyes widened as she studied the tags, running her slender fingers over the engraved letters. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you, Jack." Jack let out a small breath of relief. Maybe he could get through this after all. But the next ritual was less forgiving. Lyra's father, Eldoran, approached them with a solemn expression. "You must share a meal together," he announced. "It is a sacred act that signifies trust and unity." A tray was brought out, filled with alien food that glowed faintly in shades of blue and green. Jack stared at the unidentifiable dishes, his stomach flipping. One item in particular looked like a writhing, tentacled creature that was still alive. Do we eat that?" Jack asked hesitantly. Lyra laughed softly. "It's a delicacy. Try it. It will show my people your willingness to embrace our culture." Jack swallowed hard. He picked up the squirming creature with trembling hands, ignoring the way it seemed to wiggle in protest. Closing his eyes, he took a bite. The texture was slimy, and the taste was a mix of salt and something indescribably bitter. He barely managed to keep it down, forcing a tight-lipped smile. Lyra clapped her hands in delight. "You're doing so well. My people will see how much effort you're making." Jack tried not to gag. "Glad to hear it," he said weakly. As the rituals continued, Jack found himself swept up in the complex traditions of the HFY. He danced their ceremonial dances. Poorly. He listened to Lyra sing an ancient song in her language, her voice hauntingly beautiful. He even painted symbols on her hands using a glowing paste that burned slightly on his skin. Despite his initial panic, Jack began to notice something unexpected. Lyra wasn't just kind. She was genuinely curious about him, asking questions about Earth and his life as a soldier. Her laugh was soft but contagious, and her enthusiasm for her culture was infectious. For a moment, Jack forgot about the chaos he'd landed in. He forgot about the fact that this was all a huge misunderstanding. Instead, he found himself laughing with Lyra as they completed the rituals, her presence somehow making everything feel less overwhelming. But the moment of calm didn't last. As the final ritual ended, a tall, imposing figure entered the garden. It was Krath, Lyra's older brother, and he did not look pleased. "You've done well to fool my sister and the others," Krath said, his voice low and menacing. "But I see through you, human." Jack froze. "I don't know what you mean." Krath stepped closer, his glowing eyes narrowing. "You think you can waltz into our world, charm my sister, and become part of this family. I'll be watching you closely, Jack. Very closely." Lyra, unaware of her brother's hostility, took Jack's hand and smiled. "Come, Jack. There's so much more I want to show you." As she led him away, Jack felt the weight of Krath's glare on his back. The rituals might have gone smoothly, but it was clear his troubles were far from over. A growing connection. Jack Sullivan found himself sitting on the edge of a shimmering cliff that overlooked a valley of glowing alien plants. The landscape of HFY was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Vibrant colors that shifted and shimmered in waves, as if the land itself were alive. Beside him sat Lyra, her silver skin glowing faintly in the soft light of the twin moons. The day had been a whirlwind of rituals, and Jack's nerves were still frayed. Between nearly choking on alien food and dancing a ceremonial routine that made him look like a malfunctioning robot, he wasn't sure how he'd survived. Yet here he was, watching Lyra carve something into a smooth crystal slab with a small, glowing tool. "What are you doing?" Jack asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Lyra glanced at him with a small smile. "It's a tradition. I'm engraving our bonding symbol. It represents trust, respect, and unity." Jack leaned closer, noticing the intricate pattern she was etching. It resembled two spirals intertwining, surrounded by small, star-like marks. "It's beautiful," he admitted. Lyra's smile widened. "It's our bond. You don't have something similar on Earth." Jack scratched the back of his neck, feeling awkward. "Well, we have rings for marriage. They're, a lot simpler than this." Lyra tilted her head, intrigued. "Rings? How fascinating. What do they symbolize?" Jack hesitated, unsure how to explain human customs to someone from an entirely different world. "They're kind of like a promise, a way to show commitment to someone you care about." Lyra's glowing eyes softened. "That's beautiful in its simplicity." Jack shifted uncomfortably. He still hadn't figured out how to explain that this whole situation was a misunderstanding. But as he watched Lyra's delicate hands work on the engraving, he couldn't bring himself to say anything. She seemed genuinely happy, and he didn't want to be the one to shatter that. "Tell me more about Earth," Lyra said suddenly, breaking the silence. "What's it like to live there?" Jack thought for a moment. "It's complicated. We've got cities with tall buildings, forests that stretch for miles, oceans bigger than anything you've ever seen. But it's not as peaceful as HFY. People argue, fight, and make mistakes. A lot of mistakes." Lyra frowned slightly. "It sounds chaotic, but also full of life." Jack chuckled. "Yeah, that's one way to put it." For the first time, the conversation felt natural. Jack realized that despite her alien appearance, Lyra wasn't so different from him. She was curious, thoughtful, and in her own way, a little awkward. "I've always wondered what it would be like to see other worlds," Lyra said softly, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "To explore, to meet new people. But my role here keeps me tied to this planet." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You don't want to stay here?" Lyra hesitated before answering. "It's not that I don't love my people. I do. But being the daughter of the leader, it comes with expectations. I'm supposed to follow traditions, uphold the culture, marry someone who strengthens our alliances. I've never really had a choice." Her words hit Jack harder than he expected. He hadn't thought about how much pressure Lyra must be under, or how lonely she might feel despite being surrounded by her people. "Well," Jack said, trying to lighten the mood, "if it makes you feel any better, I'm pretty sure I'm the worst choice for an alliance partner. I don't even know half your customs." Lyra laughed, a soft, melodic sound that made Jack smile despite himself. "You may be clueless, Jack, but you've shown more respect for my culture in one day than some of my people do in a lifetime." Jack looked at her, surprised. "Really?" Lyra nodded. "You're trying. That means more than you realize." The moment stretched between them, the air filled with the faint hum of the glowing valley below. Jack felt a strange sense of calm he hadn't experienced since landing on Exarquil. But the peace didn't last long. A sharp sound broke the silence, a low, guttural growl from the shadows behind them. Jack turned, his heart racing, and spotted a creature emerging from the darkness. It was massive, with sleek black fur that shimmered faintly under the moonlight and eyes that glowed a menacing red. Lyra froze, her face pale. "A Kralith stalker," she whispered. "They're deadly predators." Jack instinctively reached for his sidearm, only to remember he wasn't allowed to carry weapons during the ceremonies. He cursed under his breath. Any idea how to handle this thing? Lyra shook her head, her voice trembling. "We need to move slowly. If we run, it will chase us." The creature snarled, its sharp fangs glinting as it stepped closer. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't let anything happen to Lyra, not after everything she'd shared with him. "Stay behind me," Jack said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Lyra hesitated but nodded, trusting him. As the creature prowled closer, Jack took a deep breath. He didn't know how he was going to handle this, but one thing was clear: he had to protect her, no matter what. The rival suitor. The grand arena of Exarquil was buzzing with energy. Thousands of Exarquilians gathered in the towering circular structure, their glowing eyes fixed on the center stage. The air vibrated with anticipation, the hum of the crowd blending with the soft, pulsating light of the arena walls. Jack Sullivan stood awkwardly at the center, feeling like a bug under a magnifying glass. "This is insane," Jack muttered under his breath. Standing across from him was Krath, Lyra's towering older brother and a warrior of legendary status among their people. His silver skin shimmered under the bright arena lights, and his glowing eyes locked onto Jack with a mix of disdain and fury. "Human," Krath boomed, his voice echoing through the arena. "You are unworthy of my sister, yet you dare stand here as her chosen mate. You dishonor our family and our traditions." Jack gulped. He wasn't sure how he'd gotten into this mess. One moment, he was trying to figure out how to navigate Exarquilian customs, and the next, he was being challenged to a duel by Lyra's overly protective brother. Apparently, Krath didn't believe Jack deserved to be engaged to Lyra. And honestly, Jack agreed with him, but there was no way out. Declining the challenge would be seen as an act of cowardice and disrespect. According to Lyra, the duel was symbolic, a way to prove his intentions and earn the respect of her family. "I'm not here to dishonor anyone," Jack said, trying to sound confident. "This whole thing was an accident." Silence. Krath growled, his glowing eyes narrowing. "You will face me in combat and prove your worth. If you fail, you will leave this planet and never speak to my sister again." The crowd erupted into cheers, clearly eager for the spectacle. Jack glanced at Lyra, who was seated in a raised platform alongside her father. Her face was a mixture of worry and guilt. She hadn't wanted this either, but Sarquillian customs were strict, and Krath had insisted on the challenge. "Jack," Lyra called out, her voice barely audible over the crowd. "Stay calm. Use your instincts. You don't have to win, just survive." "Great advice," Jack muttered sarcastically. A loud chime echoed through the arena, signaling the start of the duel. Krath wasted no time, lunging forward with a weapon that resembled a glowing staff. Jack barely dodged the first swing, stumbling backward as the crowd roared in approval. "Okay, think, Jack," he whispered to himself, his heart pounding. He didn't have a weapon, armor, or any idea how to fight an alien warrior. What he did have was quick thinking and a strong desire not to die. Krath attacked again, his movements precise and powerful. Jack ducked under a sweeping strike, narrowly avoiding the glowing staff that left a faint scorch mark on the ground. "You're faster than I expected," Krath sneered. "But speed won't save you." Jack spotted a pile of small metallic spheres on the edge of the arena. He remembered Lyra mentioning that Sarquillian warriors trained with these devices, using them for tactical challenges. If he could get to them, maybe he had a chance. Dodging another attack, Jack sprinted toward the spheres. The crowd gasped as Krath pursued him, his staff slamming into the ground just inches behind Jack. Reaching the pile, Jack grabbed one of the spheres and pressed a button on its surface. The sphere emitted a bright flash and released a thick cloud of shimmering smoke. Krath hesitated, momentarily blinded, giving Jack a chance to think. Come on," Jack muttered, fiddling with the spheres. He activated another, which produced a pulse of energy that sent Krath stumbling backward. The crowd roared in shock and excitement. Jack couldn't tell if they were cheering for him or Krath, but he didn't care. He was just trying to stay alive. Krath recovered quickly, his expression now one of pure rage. "You fight like a coward, human." "Yeah, well, I'm not exactly trained for this." Jack shot back, rolling out of the way of another strike. He activated another sphere, this one creating a barrier of energy between him and Krath. It wouldn't hold for long, but it gave Jack a moment to catch his breath. As he glanced toward Lyra, he saw her leaning forward, her hands clasped tightly. "You're doing well," she called out. "Define well," Jack muttered, his chest heaving. Krath shattered the barrier with a powerful strike and closed the distance between them. Jack knew he couldn't keep running forever. He needed to end this, somehow. Spotting a weak point in Krath's stance, Jack decided to take a risk. As Krath swung his staff, Jack ducked low and swept his leg, knocking the warrior off balance. The crowd gasped as Krath hit the ground, his weapon clattering to the side. Jack scrambled to his feet, holding one of the spheres threateningly. "Call it off, Krath. I don't want to hurt you." Krath's eyes narrowed, but he raised a hand, signaling the end of the duel. The arena fell silent, and then erupted into cheers. Eldoran stood, his voice booming over the noise. "The human has shown courage and resourcefulness. He has earned the right to remain." Jack let out a shaky breath as Krath stood, towering over him once again. For a moment, Jack thought Krath might attack him anyway, but instead, the warrior gave a grudging nod. "You've proven yourself. For now," Krath said, "but I'll be watching you, human." As the crowd began to disperse, Lyra rushed to Jack's side. "You were amazing," she said, her glowing eyes filled with admiration. "I thought I was going to die," Jack admitted, his legs trembling. Lyra laughed softly. "You're full of surprises, Jack Sullivan." Jack managed a weak smile. But deep down, he knew this was far from over. Krath's acceptance was temporary, and he still had a long way to go before he could fully earn the trust of Lyra's people, or figure out how to fix this mess he'd stumbled into. Secrets revealed. The soft hum of the Sarquillian council chamber was almost soothing. Almost. Jack Sullivan sat stiffly in his seat, his palms damp with sweat. Across the room, The council members sat in a semicircle, their glowing eyes fixed on him like predators watching prey. Lyra stood beside him, her presence a small comfort in an otherwise tense situation. The room was a masterpiece of alien design. The walls shimmered with flowing patterns that seemed to change in response to the emotions in the room, and the air buzzed faintly with energy. Jack had come to recognize this as a sign of tension, and he had every reason to feel it. Kraft stood at the center of the room, holding a holographic device in his hand. His silver skin seemed to glow brighter under the council's lights, his imposing figure radiating triumph. "I bring evidence," Kraft announced, his deep voice echoing through the chamber, "that the human Jack Sullivan has deceived us all. His so-called proposal to my sister was not an act of honor but a mistake, a blunder born of ignorance." Gasps rippled through the council, their glowing eyes darting between Kraft and Jack. Jack's heart sank. He'd known this moment was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. Eldoran, Lyra's father and the leader of the HFY, raised a hand to silence the murmurs. "Kraft, you make a grave accusation. What proof do you offer?" Kraft activated the holographic device, and a projection of the original ceremony appeared. Jack watched in horror as his awkward gesture was replayed for everyone to see, the moment he had unknowingly performed the sacred bonding ritual. "Observe," Kraft said, pointing at the projection. "The human had no understanding of our customs. He performed the gesture out of ignorance, not respect." The murmurs returned, louder this time. Jack could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. Eldoran turned his piercing gaze toward Jack. "What do you have to say to this, human? Is it true?" Jack swallowed hard. He glanced at Lyra, who looked as though she wanted to speak but was holding herself back. He knew he couldn't let her take the blame for this. "It's true," Jack admitted, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "I didn't know what the gesture meant. It was an accident. But I swear, I never meant to disrespect your culture or your people." The room fell silent. The council members exchanged unreadable glances, their glowing eyes dimming slightly. Kraft stepped forward, his expression triumphant. "You see, this human is unworthy of my sister and unworthy of the trust we have placed in him. He has mocked our traditions." "That's not true." Lyra's voice rang out, cutting through the tension like a blade. She stepped forward, her glowing eyes fierce as they locked onto her brother. Jack may not have known what he was doing, but his actions were never meant to harm. He has shown nothing but respect for our people since the moment he arrived. "Respect," Kraft scoffed. "He has brought nothing but chaos." Lyra ignored him, turning to the council. "I have spent more time with Jack than anyone here. I have seen his courage, his kindness, and his willingness to learn. He may not have intended to propose, but he has proven himself worthy in ways that go beyond tradition." The council murmured again, this time with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. Eldoran's expression softened slightly as he regarded his daughter. "And what do you propose, Lyra?" he asked. Lyra took a deep breath. "I propose that we look beyond the mistake and judge Jack by his actions, not his ignorance. He has risked his life for me, faced challenges he was not prepared for, and treated our people with respect, even when he didn't understand our ways. Isn't that what truly matters?" Jack felt a surge of gratitude and guilt. He hadn't asked for any of this, but Lyra's unwavering belief in him made him want to live up to her words. Eldoran nodded slowly. "Your words carry weight, Lyra, but this is not a decision to be made lightly." Kraft's face twisted in anger. "You cannot allow this to stand. The human must be held accountable for his actions." Eldoran raised a hand to silence him. "Enough, Kraft. The council will deliberate." The room fell silent as the council members closed their eyes, their glowing patterns dimming as they communicated telepathically. Jack felt like he was sitting on a ticking time bomb, each second stretching into an eternity. Finally, the council leader opened his eyes and spoke. "We agree that the human has made mistakes, but his intentions appear to be honorable. To prove his worth, he must complete the trial of unity. Lyra gasped. The trial of unity. That's dangerous. Eldoran's expression was unreadable. If Jack succeeds, he will have earned our respect and proven himself worthy of remaining bonded to you. If he fails, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. What exactly is this trial? He asked cautiously. Eldoran's eyes locked onto his. You will face the wilderness of HFY alone. It is a test of survival, courage, and resourcefulness. Few succeed. Jack's heart pounded, but he nodded. I'll do it. Lyra grabbed his arm, her voice trembling. You don't have to. Yes, I do, Jack said firmly. He turned to Eldoran. When does it start? Tomorrow, Eldoran replied. Prepare yourself, human. As Jack left the chamber with Lyra by his side, he couldn't shake the feeling that his real challenges were only just beginning. The final challenge. The dense wilderness of HFY stretched out before Jack Sullivan, an endless maze of glowing plants, jagged cliffs, and strange alien wildlife. The air was thick with humidity, and the faint hum of bioluminescent flora filled the silence. Jack tightened the straps of his gear, his heart pounding as he stepped into the unknown. The trial of unity had begun. Behind him, the council's voice echoed faintly in his mind. Survive the wilderness and retrieve the unity crystal from the cavern of trials. Only then will you prove your worth. Easy for them to say, Jack thought bitterly. He had no map, no guide, and no clue what to expect. All he had was a basic survival kit, his wits, and the nagging feeling that this might be his last day alive. The first few hours were uneventful, though every sound in the forest set Jack on edge. The plants glowed softly, casting eerie shadows, and strange creatures darted in and out of sight. One of them, a small furry thing with 6 legs and glowing blue eyes, seemed to follow him from a distance. You're cute, Jack muttered, but I'm not sure if you're friend or food. The creature chirped in response, then scurried off into the undergrowth. Jack sighed and pressed on, his boots crunching softly against the alien soil. As the hours dragged on, the terrain grew harsher. Sharp rocks jutted out of the ground like teeth, and thick, vine-like plants seemed to move on their own, brushing against Jack as if testing him. He tried to stay focused, but exhaustion was creeping in. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the forest, freezing Jack in his tracks. He turned slowly, his pulse racing, and spotted a hulking creature emerging from the shadows. It was massive, with slick, black skin that shimmered faintly in the light. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Jack, and a row of sharp teeth gleamed as it snarled. A Kralith stalker, Jack whispered, remembering Lyra's warning. Of course. The creature lunged, and Jack dove to the side, narrowly avoiding its claws. Scrambling to his feet, he grabbed a flare from his pack and ignited it. The bright light startled the stalker, causing it to hesitate. Not so tough now, are you? Jack taunted, waving the flare. The creature growled again, circling him cautiously. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't outrun it, and the flare wouldn't last forever. He needed a plan, and fast. Spotting a narrow crevice in the nearby rocks, Jack made a split-second decision. He threw the flare to the side, distracting the stalker, and sprinted toward the crevice. The creature roared in frustration and gave chase, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Jack squeezed into the crevice just as the stalker swiped at him, its claws scraping against the rocks. He held his breath, listening to the creature's growls as it tried to reach him. After a few tense moments, it finally gave up and disappeared into the forest. Jack slumped against the rocks, his heart pounding. Great, he muttered. Survive the stalker, die of a heart attack. After catching his breath, he crawled out of the crevice and continued on, more determined than ever. He couldn't afford to fail, not after everything he'd been through. By nightfall, Jack reached the Cavern of Trials. The entrance was marked by two massive stone pillars, etched with glowing symbols that pulsed faintly in the dark. The air around the cavern felt heavy, almost alive, and a deep, resonant hum echoed from within. Jack stepped inside cautiously, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The walls of the cavern were covered in crystals that shimmered like stars, reflecting the light in dazzling patterns. It was beautiful, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. As he ventured deeper, he encountered a series of obstacles: a narrow ledge over a deep chasm, a puzzle of shifting stone platforms, and a swarm of tiny, glowing insects that stung like fire. Each challenge tested his courage, his resourcefulness, and his determination. Finally, after what felt like hours, Jack reached the heart of the cavern. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop it rested the Unity crystal. It was breathtaking, a multifaceted gem that glowed with a soft inner light. Jack approached slowly, his steps cautious. He'd seen enough movies to know this was the part where things usually went wrong. But as he reached out and touched the crystal, nothing happened. He let out a shaky laugh, relief flooding through him. "Guess I'm not Indiana Jones after all." Holding the crystal carefully, Jack turned to leave, but his relief was short-lived. The cavern began to shake, and the walls glowed brighter, as if the crystal's removal had triggered something. "Of course," Jack groaned, breaking into a run. The ground cracked beneath him, and rocks began to fall from the ceiling. Jack dodged and weaved, clutching the crystal tightly as he made his way back to the entrance. Just as he leaped out of the cavern, the entire structure collapsed behind him in a cloud of dust and debris. Jack lay on the ground, gasping for air, the Unity crystal still clutched in his hand. He'd done it. Against all odds, he'd survived the trial of Unity. As he sat up, the small six-legged creature from earlier reappeared, chirping happily as it hopped onto his knee. Jack chuckled. "You again? Guess I made it out alive, huh?" The creature chirped again, and Jack smiled. For the first time since arriving on HFY, he felt like he might actually belong here. A bond forged. The HFY capital was alive with light and sound as Jack Sullivan stepped into the grand ceremonial hall. His every step echoed on the polished crystal floor, each one accompanied by the hum of anticipation that filled the air. The Unity crystal, now resting securely in his hands, pulsed faintly with an inner glow, its light reflecting off the curious faces of the crowd that had gathered. Jack's clothes were torn, his face smudged with dirt, and his muscles ached from the grueling trial. But he held his head high, his grip on the crystal firm. He had survived the wilderness, faced the cavern of trials, and returned victorious. Yet, as he approached the center of the hall, he couldn't shake the knot of uncertainty in his stomach. Standing at the head of the assembly was Eldoran, his towering figure radiating authority. To his right stood Lyra, her glowing eyes filled with relief and something else Jack couldn't quite place. Pride, maybe. Beside her, Krath glowered, his expression as cold and unyielding as stone. "The human returns," Eldoran announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "And he carries with him the Unity crystal. This is a rare feat, one that only the strongest and most worthy achieve." A murmur swept through the crowd, their glowing eyes flickering with newfound respect. Jack felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he had finally earned their trust. Eldoran gestured for Jack to step forward. Jack Sullivan placed the Unity crystal on the altar. Jack nodded and approached the pedestal at the center of the hall. The altar was made of smooth, glowing stone, its surface engraved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow. Carefully, Jack set the crystal in its place, and the entire room lit up as the altar absorbed its energy. A wave of light washed over the crowd, and for a moment, Jack felt something strange, a connection, almost like the thoughts and emotions of the HFYians were brushing against his own. It was overwhelming but strangely comforting, like being part of something far greater than himself. "The trial of Unity has been completed," Eldoran declared. Jack Sullivan has proven his courage, resourcefulness, and respect for our ways. By the will of the council, he has earned his place among us." The crowd erupted in cheers, their melodic voices filling the hall. Jack exhaled, the tension draining from his body. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Lyra approached him, her smile radiant. "You survived," she said softly. "Barely," Jack replied with a grin. That trial was no joke. Her laughter was like music, light and joyful. "You didn't just survive, Jack. You thrived. My people see it now. You belong here." Kraft stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Jack tensed, expecting another challenge, but to his surprise, Kraft extended his hand. "You have my respect, human," Kraft said gruffly. "You've proven yourself worthy of my sister's bond." Jack hesitated for a moment before shaking Kraft's hand. "Thanks, I think." The crowd began to disperse, but El Duran raised his hand to signal silence. "One matter remains," he said, his gaze shifting between Jack and Lyra. "The bond you have formed is sacred. The question now is whether you will honor it." Jack felt the weight of every eye in the room on him. He turned to Lyra, who met his gaze with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. Jack hesitated. This was the moment of truth. He hadn't planned for any of this. It had all started as an accident. But now, standing here, he couldn't deny the bond he felt with Lyra. She had stood by him, believed in him, and fought for him when no one else would. "I'll honor it," Jack said firmly, "but not because of tradition or obligation. Because I want to." Lyra's eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed caught off guard. Then her smile returned, brighter than ever. "I accept your bond, Jack Sullivan." The crowd erupted once more, and El Duran nodded approvingly. "Then it is decided. Let this union mark a new chapter for our people and our alliance with humanity." As the ceremony concluded, Jack and Lyra stepped outside, the soft glow of the twin moons bathing the city in silver light. The weight of the day's events began to lift, replaced by a strange sense of peace. "So," Jack said, glancing at Lyra, "looks like I'm sticking around." Lyra laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Jack smiled, feeling a sense of belonging he hadn't expected. For the first time, Sarquil didn't feel like an alien world. It felt like home.